and welcome to the very first episode of Project Monster Island, a Godzilla film review series podcast where we're going to be discussing each of the Godzilla films in chronological order. And not just the Godzilla films, we'll also focus on the other kaiju films as well, such as Rodan, Mothra, King Kong, and so on. I'm Adam, and today I am joined by my good friend and fellow co-host for the Paper Movies Novelization Book Club podcast. Perhaps you heard of us, but I'm joined by Matthew. How's it going, Matthew?
Hello, Adam. Thanks for having me on this first episode of Project Monster Island. I'm excited to talk about Godzilla, something that I'm not normally doing anywhere. So,
yeah, that's exactly why I invited you to be on this podcast, because normally your experience with Godzilla has been the newer films, like the Monarch or Monsterverse films, and of course the 90s Godzilla film starring Matthew Broderick and directed by Roland Emmerich. We actually recently discussed that novelization on Paper Movies. Guys, if you have not seen that episode or heard that episode, definitely go check that out. It was a decent conversation.
yeah, it was a good one.
But today we are going to be starting from the beginning all the way back to the year 1954. We're going to be discussing the film Godzilla, or Gojira as it was originally called. It was directed by Ishiro Honda, written also by Ishiro Honda and Takeo Murata. The score was by Akira Ifukube and distributed by Toho. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm terrible with names in general, so I am probably going to be butchering a lot of these names. So just wanted to give you guys a fair warning. So if I mispronounce any of these names, I apologize. It is not intentional.
Right. Yeah, I'm bad enough with English names. I can't imagine speaking Japanese names.
But I'm going to go ahead and start off with a brief summary. After a few ships are mysteriously destroyed, Dr. Yamane leads an investigation on Odo Island and soon discovers the source of all the destruction. The source being a 50-meter tall creature, the residents of Odo Island named Godzilla. A creature that was mutated from the aftermath of the hydrogen bomb testing. Godzilla soon arrives in Tokyo and lays waste to the city. Despite all the efforts from the Japanese military, Godzilla appears to be indestructible. But Yamane's daughter, Emiko, knows of a secret device that was invented by a scientist named Dr. Serizawa, which may be their only hope in defeating Godzilla. So, again, Matthew, I invited you on this podcast because Matthew has not seen any of the original Godzilla films from Toho. Like I said, he's only seen the ones that were made in America. And so I asked him to watch the original Japanese film. It was streaming free on some streaming sites. So I asked him to watch it because I wanted to get his perspective as someone who's not, typically a Godzilla fan. Like I said, he knows the Monsterverse films, and he's even collected some of the novels recently, and we'll get into that maybe later. But Matthew, what did you think?
So I did not know what to expect going into watching this original film, because like you'd mentioned, my favorite Godzilla film, the 1998 one, my favorite because that's pretty much the only one I've ever seen. Plus the new stuff. You got the Godzilla from 2014, right? Or 2016. You got the Godzilla versus Kong, all those things. Those were all fine and dandy. But with the original Godzilla movie, I was actually blown away with this film.
Really?
I was surprised at how much I liked it. Even the music was fantastic.
Yeah, that you heard the iconic score again by Akira Ifukube. He wrote the. You may have heard his remnants of his score in Godzilla King of the Monsters, the American one. You hear the bum 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 bum. I don't want to do too much. I don't get copyrighted on the first episode. So, but I was kind of wondering what your take on this would be, because this is drastically different than most of the other Godzilla films that you've seen. And in the 90s one, you know, he's got this innocence to him because he's just an animal. In the American the Monarch films, he's presented more as a defender of nature. Yeah, and this one, he's just a flat out villain.
Yeah, he's here to destroy. And I like that Godzilla. I like the one that he's just kind of a wild creature who's upset with something that's been happening. He's like been awakened by from his slumber, and he comes up and he's like, I gotta put a stop to this. I liked the pacing of the film a lot too. I love how it started off really just, it opens up with an action scene, you know, and the way they did the effects back there in the 50s, of course, things have changed. So it kind of looks silly today watching those things. But if you put yourself in that mindset of like, you know, put yourself in the 50s and watch it, you're just kind of like, whoa, this is awesome. The characters were fantastic. Even though the whole film was in subtitles, I didn't have a problem with that. I loved it. If they had an English translation out there, I'm sure there's somebody out there that put English audio on top of it. That would be entertaining to watch too. That way I can keep my eyes completely on the screen, like watching all of the action. But yeah, I thought with a lot of the monster films, they try to get into the characters and they fail a lot. And I thought that this one had a wonderful character development with everybody, and the way that they try to come up with an idea like to get rid of Godzilla was horrifying.
Yeah, you're right. It does actually have like some pretty great characters. And on the note where you mentioned if they have like if it's dubbed anywhere, technically yes, it's the Americanization of it. It's titled Godzilla King of the Monsters. It came out a couple of years after this. It's basically they just kind of added some scenes to it with their own actor Raymond Burr. Like they just refilmed and added some additional audio to the scenes. And yeah, like I kind of want you to check out that one too. But I absolutely love this film. Like it wasn't actually until a few years back that I first saw it. I was more used to watching the original one with Raymond Burr, the Americanization one, and I like that one. I mean, there's a lot of nostalgia, but I'm going to be completely honest. I think that this film is superior to that one because it's dark.
Yeah,
like the Godzilla being symbolic for the aftermath of nuclear testing. You know, it's just how it just keeps coming back and just haunting you, and just like how it just keeps coming back to just, you know, stomp all over you. And it's just, what I liked about it is this, it adds a level of, you know, freshness to it. It's just, even though I've seen this film several times since I first watched it, it always feels like new to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I have films like that too, like Ghostbusters, one of my favorite movies of all time. Every time I watch it, it's like something new pops out at me, and it's like still, oh man, that makes this movie even better. So I do plan on revisiting Godzilla. I want to watch it again, like not streaming. I want to get like an actual digital copy or like a Blu-ray or something, so I can watch it without those lame interruptions. I watched it on, I think, Tubi, so it had commercial breaks, and they're just, you know, they go on and on. You're like, oh man, I can't handle this. But I do want to watch more Godzilla films because of this one. I thought that, like I said, the music was fantastic. I love how there are little things that the newer movies, like the 98 version, took from this film, that like when the people are all gathered around after Godzilla emerges for the first time, and then they're kind of looking for him or the evidence of him, and they're standing in his footprint. I was like, 1998 calling back when they are like standing in the footprint. I was like, okay, Roland Emmerich did do some things that were great with his 1998 film that tied back to the original stuff. There were other little things too that I kept thinking of as I was watching, that reminded me of some of the newer things, like Godzilla, you know, coming up from the caverns. It mentions he was like, oh, he's in caverns in the earth. Well, they're in the Godzilla versus Kong is when we're introduced to Hollow Earth, right? Or Kong Skull Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, they probably took that little piece out of this original film. Oh, he's in caverns in the ocean. That sounds like there could be a hollow earth under there, so we're just gonna use that.
Actually, you know what's funny about that scene that I noticed after rewatching it? Whenever they first saw Godzilla for the first time, they're on the island, they're examining the footprint, and then you hear someone, hitting the bell saying that they spotted Godzilla. So they all run up the hill to go try and see him. There's one thing that I noticed. Dr. Yamane who was already on the shore whenever they were like studying the footprint with everybody else when they heard the bell being sounded. By the time they all made it up there, he was already well up there. That guy must have been hauling. I was like, man, how fast did that guy run? Yeah, and then he said, it's like, I just saw a creature from the Jurassic or Triassic era. Just even that one scene where you just kind of see Godzilla pop his head up out of the over the hill, that was just terrifying enough as it is. Like, and it's just like, well, what I like about this film is that it truly shows like the destructive nature of Godzilla. Like, sure, he destroys the city like in many other films, but like there's been several other films that have came pretty close to like how destructive Godzilla is. Godzilla -1 that just came out recently is a good example of that. The movie Shin Godzilla shows how destructive he could be, but it says this one is just like will always be my favorite because he just outright destroys Tokyo. And like I said, it gets really, really dark. Like one of the darkest scenes in this film for me would be when the mother is like holding her three children, and then she's just saying like, we're going to be with your daddy soon, as Godzilla's just burning like everything in his path. And I was just like, man.
Yeah. I wrote that down. I was like, oh man, that's so sad. And it's like, we'll be with daddy soon. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, not only does it show how destructive Godzilla is, it shows how destructive physically and emotionally the aftermath of a Godzilla attack is. Like, as you see, like all the people trying to, like the people like in the hospitals, like in the debris, and like dead bodies being carried off, kids crying as their dead parents or dead family members are being, carried off. It's heartbreaking.
I thought I wrote down another note here about, I thought it's not funny, but it kind of is funny. Like depending on the way that you look at it, like he comes up, he like flips over a train and then he like stomps off back into the ocean. It's like, he just came up to just, I'm going to cause problems for you and I'm going to go about my day.
Yeah, that was actually, I love that introduction. Like where we first see him in full view. The music was amazing in that. Like it was a ascending, like, bomb, 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 bomb. And that was just only a taste of like what he could do. Like he was just wanting to just like, he was like, hi, I'm your new neighbor. I'm here to destroy you. Like, and I'm going to come back and things are going to be much, much worse.
Yeah. It was interesting too, that there was that professor that was like wanting to study Godzilla, even though he's causing all this like mayhem. He's like, we can't kill it. We got to keep it alive. We got to study him. It's like, there's no way that you're going to tranquilize something that massive to study it. Like, how would you study Godzilla? Just keep watching him destroy your city? Like,
I mean, yeah.
Sometimes it's best not to study.
I mean, I 100% see things from his perspective, but at the same time, I also 100% see things from the perspective of the Japanese citizens, where this is a 160-foot radioactive mutant fire-breathing dinosaur. Like, let's not roll out the red carpet for him.
I also liked how there was a reporter that was reporting on Godzilla's like reign of terror towards the end there, and Godzilla's like walking straight towards the guy. He's like in this like on a tower. He reports to the very end. Like, he's like, Godzilla's coming this way now. Oh, my time is up. I was like, man, dedication right there. Professional to the end.
I know. He probably was like, there was like absolutely no way he was going to get out of there. I mean, they were all like flashing, photography at him. Like they were getting his attention. They were asking for it. I mean,
Yeah.
and so I was just like, if I was in his shoes, I'd be like, you know what? I'm going down reporting, yeah, that dedication to the end. Now,
yeah.
One, you mentioned that the Monarch films, like, were bringing in like some Easter eggs, if you will, from these original films into the new ones. And we actually do also have a character that makes an appearance. It's a different character, but Dr. Serizawa. In the film, Dr. Serizawa is he's engaged to Dr. Yamane's daughter, Emiko. But to add a little bit of a romantic drama into this, like, Emiko is in love with a man named Ogata, but she's engaged to Serizawa, and Serizawa, I don't think he doesn't really act that interested in the film. Dr. Serizawa in the film develops a device known as the oxygen destroyer. The oxygen destroyer is capable of destroying all the oxygen in the water and disintegrating all the life forms within, close distance of it. It's pretty horrifying when you think about it. Just, you could be in the water just one day.
Oh yeah, it is.
And it goes off, and then you're a skeleton.
I thought that was a great tool that he created, or weapon he created. I love the introduction of it. How it's teased in the beginning, where I can't remember the names. I'm horrible with it. Like I can't remember them. But when the lady walks in and he shows her what it is, and it's supposed to be a top secret.
Oh, Emiko, yeah.
Yeah, and we just see the fish tank kind of bubble up, and she screams, and then it cuts away to something different. I was like, wait, what was it? What happened? And so later on, it's revealed to us what happened, and I thought that was a brilliant way to introduce such a like terrifying weapon. And that if they're going to use that later on, you're like, man, that's going to cause a lot of life to die in the ocean. And the way that it was utilized was fantastic, I thought. And it wasn't overdone, like, oh, if we drop an H-bomb on him, it's just going to make him even more angry. I don't think they even talked about that, but I do know that they said that that's what kind of woke him up, right? So I thought the oxygen bomb was a great way to kill off Godzilla, which was wild. I didn't know that they were actually going to do that. So spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie from the 50s, but it was a terrifying thing.
I agree. It was perfect how they introduced it. Like, it left you wanting more. And it was classic 50s special effects for like horror films and something like that. And I gotta say, Serizawa, he doesn't make very much appearances in this movie, but he is a very noble scientist. Like, he does not want his secret out into the world because he knows that if it gets into the wrong hands, it will cause so much destruction, which is, again, symbolizes, Godzilla. Godzilla is an aftermath of, nuclear weapons testing, and, that it mutated him. It brought him from the depth, woke him from the depths of the ocean. And he was around even before the hydrogen bomb testing. Like, the residents of Odo Island, they talked about how they would, send a sacrifice out to Godzilla, before the events of this film even took place. And in one Godzilla film, they do show him like actually on the island before, he gets, mutated by. So it's just like seeing him like in his first, form was pretty terrifying enough.
I wrote down one of the quotes from the film when they were discussing how can we kill this creature. Somebody says that the professor, he says, it was baptized in the fire of H-bombs. What could kill it? So that was pretty cool. But then they found the answer with the oxygen destroyer. Not, I keep calling it an oxygen bomb. They call it the oxygen destroyer. And brilliant weapon. I like how they also said that weapon is like, we can't use this. It would be it's an aquatic. It would create an aquatic graveyard. That they said. Not to get religious here, but it reminded me of in the book of Revelation where there's talk about how like half the ocean, or a third of the ocean, can't remember the exact numbers, but like living creatures in the sea are all going to die. And that's what it kind of like made me think of, like, oh crap, That's spooky.
They actually do have a version of Godzilla that is more of a apocalyptic take on it. It was an anime on Netflix. And, you know, it showed like the oceans turning red and everything, and like there was like some apocalyptic symbolism with it, like you said, the oceans turning red, how it's like, you know, mentioned in the Bible. Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much for you, but you know, at the end, when after they travel out to the ocean and they find where Godzilla's, you know, resting, and they plant the device, you know, Godzilla is killed. He sinks to the bottom of the ocean and just, you know, disintegrates. Dr. Yamane kind of hints that like another Godzilla could come again if, you know, nuclear tests or nuclear weapons keep existing. And I'm just gonna say, like, in the Americanization Godzilla King of the Monsters, they kind of add something there. I'm not gonna say what it is. I want you to check it out.
Okay.
But it's kind of chilling. But you mentioned the characters. Yeah, this is one of the Godzilla characters in the films throughout the years. You know, there's been a few movies. Like I've heard it said that, you know, there's only like maybe 2 or 3 Godzilla films that had like unique characters and worthy of investing in. And you know, I wouldn't necessarily. I think there's a little more. Like there was a few films that I really enjoyed the characters in, but you know, some of them were just kind of, you know, cheesy, I guess. But I do think that out of most of the Godzilla films, like if I had to pick like a top 5 Godzilla films that had the best human characters, like this would definitely be up there, like either first or second place.
I love the conflict too. I know this is kind of like backtracking, but I love the conflict in the characters. Like every way they look at it is just not a good thing, you know, like we need to kill Godzilla. No, we need to study him. Like, well, but we can't let him just destroy the city. So we'll come up with a weapon to destroy him. But oh man, if our weapon falls into the wrong hands, then it's going to be used as a weapon against other people. It's like it was a lose-lose situation all the way around. And I thought that was a cool little thing that a little twist in the film that maybe a message they were trying to push that was just nice and subtle.
Mm-hmm. Like fighting fire with fire,
right?
And it's, like I said, it's heartbreaking. Like again, not really to backtrack, but like whenever there's a big conflict between Ogata and Dr. Serizawa, where they plead with him to use the device against Godzilla, but he does not want any knowledge of it out there. There's a fight that ensues, and then they watch TV, and a chorus of children are singing this hauntingly beautiful piece, honoring those that were lost to Godzilla the previous night. And it kind of throws a curveball at you because he destroys all of his notes, and you think like, okay, well, they just killed Godzilla and then that'll be that. But no, he realizes that even if all of his notes are destroyed, he has the knowledge.
Yeah.
Like even if they can't use his notes to create another oxygen destroyer, like they have him. So he puts a noble sacrifice. And personally, I don't think he probably went into that knowing that he was going to die, because he probably knew that he wasn't going to be able to escape from the oxygen destroyer.
Right.
And even so, I mean, he cut the line, so he was doomed either way. But he was
ready. He was ready to go.
It's a very sad film, but it's a classic.
It is. It did have some like beautiful shots too for a black and white film that from the 50s. Like when it would just pan across the destruction, like the city that's full of destruction. It's like, man, that's some pretty cool shots. You know, it's like smoky and the buildings are all knocked over. They did a really good job, you know, working with the miniatures and the sets that they had.
Yeah, they Godzilla in this one was an actor in a costume, and I read about how miserable it was to film this movie for them. I also I read a little bit about how like some of the atomic breath happened. Like there's like, you might have saw like some scenes where you see like Godzilla's head and he's kind of moving his head around. You see like, you know, smoke coming out of or fire coming out of his mouth. Mm-hmm. Like they actually had a puppet and they like were shooting steam or smoke or something out of his mouth. And then there was, you know, some scenes where they just added their own effects to show the atomic breath. But I was like, for being in the 50s, the effects in this film, like you said, are just great.
Yeah. And I thought like him breathing like that fire was awesome because like that's what I saw was like he's breathing radiation out, blowing it on these things, and it's like it gets to that boiling point where it just erupts into flames. I thought that was really cool. That was a cool effect on its own.
Oh yeah, and Godzilla's roar in this one is my favorite because I don't know. It's just throughout most of the other films, like his roar is like very high pitched and less threatening, I should say. The roar in this one though is just dark. Whenever you hear it, you know that something bad is about to happen. And they reused this roar in several of the Heisei era, which is like the 80s and 90s films, and also in Godzilla -1. But I thought it was very interesting how they came up with this roar. They took a upright bass or upright. It was either a cello. I can't quite remember. It was an upright bass or an upright cello, and they detuned the strings. They grabbed like a leather glove, and they just kind of rubbed their hands up and down the strings to
really
roar. So, and then once I read that, and I went back and listened, like, oh yeah, I can hear the zoom, in the roar, and
that's cool. I always, for some reason, I love the roar of Godzilla. Like all of the versions that I've heard, I've loved them. It's always reminded me of like this is how I imagined they made it. They had a rusty gate, and they were dragging it across like a metal floor, like closing it. And then they played it back into like a empty metal coffee can and like recorded the echo from inside the coffee can. That's how I've always like hear it in my head. It's like, man, they used a rusty gate in a coffee can to make that effect. I'm way off.
Very practical, like how they came up with it, and it's still like one of the most iconic roars in cinema history. Like you hear that, and then you're like, oh, that's Godzilla.
Yeah, it's very distinct. It's not like just some typical animal dinosaur type roar. When the Godzilla roar hits, it's Godzilla, which is awesome.
Yeah, everybody starts running.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a favorite or least favorite part?
No, I mean, I thought the whole thing was just fantastic. I love the sacrifice of the main professor, or I guess was he the professor? I need to watch the film again. Like I said, the distractions with the commercials and the subtitles does distract me, so I do get lost on characters and who they were referring to sometimes. But the guy who creates the oxygen destroyer,
Serizawa,
yeah, I thought that was great. The sacrifice thing, I was like, that was touching, that was deep. Just the creep factor of Godzilla. Maybe my least favorite part could be the way the opening, like they did a good job with the opening. Don't get me wrong here. Like they started off with a bang, like action packed right off the get go, getting you hooked on like what's going on. Maybe they did too many quick jumps to different things, and leaving you really kind of slow down for just a second. Let me process what's going on. But that's my only complaint that I could think of, even though I thought it was great.
Yeah, I can't think of any negatives either. Like the whole movie is just my favorite part.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that I could probably think of is, like I mentioned earlier, is just something that I just noticed is like how did Dr. Yamane just get from the beach all the way to the top of the hill like faster than everybody else? Like he would have had to like do a Superman jump or something.
Yeah, he teleported.
He teleported. Yeah.
I'm glad you started up this podcast because that's what really got me to watch the original film. So thank you for that. I can't wait to watch another one.
Well, I want to thank you, Matthew, because, and I was going to do this earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and just do a couple of quick shout outs before we give our rating of the film. But Matthew was actually the one that gave me the idea to start this podcast. And it was actually a couple of years back, and I almost did start it a couple of years back. I announced it, but unfortunately life just got in the way and just never got time to record it. But I'm just glad that, to quote a famous mathematician from Jurassic Park, that life finally found a way and we're here recording it. And I'm glad that you enjoyed the film, and I hope that to have you back on the podcast to talk about the other Godzilla films. And I'm glad that you're interested now to see the other Godzilla films because of this film. And I feel like I'm corrupting you in a way.
Another
But-
fandom that I have to follow.
But I also want to give a shout out to the guys over at the podcast known as Podzilla. Their names are Micah and Jasher. I've been listening to their podcast nonstop. They also are covering Godzilla films and other Godzilla media and other kaiju films, and I really enjoy it. They, after listening to their show, like they just further inspire me to want to pursue this podcast again. So definitely shout out to them. I'll post links to where you can find them, and also post links to Matthew's channel, The Geeks Attic. And also you can find us at Paper Movies, the Novelization Book Club. And before I go though, so Matthew, rating this out of 5 stars, probably already know the answer, but what would you give this?
I'm going to give this 5.
5. Yep, 5 out of 5 for me too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really surprised that I was going into it thinking like, oh man, we have to watch some lame movie, and then when it started, I was like, this is intense, and it just kept going, and I was like, this is great. And my wife, she like sat down and was like, what are you watching? I was like, the original Godzilla. She's like, ugh. And then all of a sudden she's like, wait, that guy just died? And I was like, you're watching it now.
She's like,
she was surprised at the end too with like how Godzilla turned out. And she's like, I can't believe they did that.
It's an intense movie. I love it. And Matthew, thank you so much again for joining us on the first episode of Project Monster Island. I hope to have you back in the next episode where we're going to be discussing the Americanization version of Godzilla known as Godzilla, King of the Monsters, starring Raymond Burr. I think you'll notice some things like I mentioned, they just had to refilm some things and just to add this in here, add this in there. I'm interested to know like your thoughts on that. So, but guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed this first episode of Project Monster Island. Be sure to stay tuned for the second episode in the series for Godzilla, King of the Monsters, guys. Thank you all so much. Have a great one.